I know how some of you are feeling right now. You're thinking, if this guy's been elected to the United States Congress from 2 different states, and done all this politicking with 5 different presidents and all this business, I guess we're going to be exposed to a bunch of politics here today, are we? No, I've gone straight and I work for a living now. I want to share some things with you. If you'll listen to them and you'll apply them in your life, better than that, if you'll start to work with them here and now today, I guarantee you, you're going to feel better about yourself, and you'll do better in life. And, you know, if any of you have heard something I'm going to say, and I know we have several participants who were here at the other 2 days' meetings, and if you already heard what I'm going to say, don't stop me. Number one, I enjoy telling what I'm going to tell here today. And number two, I need it just bad as anybody here in the room. So the more we talk about this, the more fun. And it's good to see the ladies participating. Thank you for having a break, coming down here and joining us here today. And I've been impressed. I've been singularly impressed with this whole convention to see the husband and wife teams that have been participating together in this program, and a company that encourages family overall support the way they do here. That's fabulous. Thank you. You know, whenever I see the husband and wife team participating in a meeting like this, I can't help but be reminded of a situation that my good friend Congressman John Buchanan used to tell about. John Buchanan's from Birmingham, Alabama. And John, before being elected to the United States Congress, was a minister. And for about 2 or 3 years, he traveled as an evangelist through about 3 or 4 southern states. And John said many times when he was going into an area to hold a revival meeting, he'd try to get in a day or 2 or 3 early to get around, visit with the citizenry, remind them to support the work of God and to do the work of the church and so forth, and frankly, to kind of muster up a crowd so he wouldn't be disappointed whenever he was putting on a revival meeting. And he said he was going into one of these little rural communities one day, a southern community, driving down the road, saw this farmer out plowing. And he just stopped his car, and without any introduction, how do you do whatsoever, bounced right out across the turn road, right up to the farmer, and he said to him, I say there, brother, he said, are you a member of the Christian family? And the farmer looked at him kind of puzzled, and he said, well, no. He said, as a matter of fact, I ain't. He said, the Christian family lives about 2.5 miles down the road on the left. He said, no, brother. He said, I mean, are you lost? He said, well, no, I don't reckon you'd say I'm lost. He said, I've been right here on this same farm for over 25 years. He said, no, brother. He said, I mean, are you ready for the judgment day? Well, he said, I don't know. He said, when's it going to be? He said, well, it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be any time. And he said, well, when you do find out what day it's going to be, I wish you would let me know, because my wife will likely want to go both days. And, you know, as I see this group here, and as I see this exciting, enjoyable, enthusiastic participation, I know it's been a great meeting all 4 days, or ever how many days you have been here. It's been exciting every day. You got a good attitude. I like the winning attitude that I see through this whole meeting. Everybody's excited, and when you get excited, you get other people excited. You see, it's your attitude, it's how you feel about yourself that helps you to be the winner that you are and to set the example for those that you lead. Whenever I think about this, I'm reminded of a situation that happened to me some time ago. I've been invited to address the annual Chamber of Commerce meeting in Silver City, New Mexico. It's a copper mining town about 120 miles north of El Paso, up in the mountains there in New Mexico. And I got up there that evening, had about 450, 500 people in the old Murray Hotel up there. Big, long head table, and so they were all in, you know, it's a big festive, it's the big blowout of the season up there in Silver City. And I turned to the fellow sitting next to him, and I said, well, tell me, sir, I said, how are things going with you? He said, oh, Mr. Foreman said, ain't you heard about strike? I said, what strike? He said, Phelps Dodge and Kennecott, the 2 big copper companies up here, are both out on strike. And he said, let me tell you something, Mr. Foreman. He said, when those 2 companies go out on strike, he said, business in this community is bad. Now, he said, I happen to be in the real estate business. But he said it wouldn't matter if I was in the insurance business, automobile business, clothing business, grocery business, or anything else. He said, when those 2 companies go out on strike, business in this community is bad. He said, I haven't sold a house in 6 weeks, and I'll tell you something else. If this strike continues for another 4 weeks, I'm going to be on the verge of bankruptcy. I've never seen things so bad before in my life. Well, I've never heard anybody so enthusiastically negative before in my life. This guy acted like he was weaned on a dill pickle. You know, I think when he got up in the morning, instead of saying, "Good morning, God," I think he said, "Good God, it's morning." You know the type I'm talking about. Well, I was sorry. I asked him how he felt. I was supposed to bring these people a message of hope and encouragement and enthusiasm. Well, you can imagine how I felt. In just a little while, he turned, started talking to the fellow on his right, immediately took advantage of the situation, turned, started talking to the little lady on my left, must have been about 45, 50 years old. I said to her, I said, "Well, ma'am," I said, "how are things with you?" She said, "Oh, Mr. Foreman, ain't you heard about the strike?" And I thought, oh my gosh, Ed, you teach people to communicate, and you done messed up twice in the same 5 minutes. But she said, "My business is terrific." And I said, "What?" I said, "What kind of business you in, lady?" She said, "I'm in the real estate business." I said, "The real estate business?" I said, "How do you explain it?" She said, "Let me tell you something, Mr. Foreman." She said, "These young folks that work for Phelps, Dodge, and Kennecott believe in those two strong corporations." She said, "They believe in the American free enterprise system." She said, "Most of them don't want to be off on strike anyhow. And they recognize that very shortly they're going to be going back to work, and when they do, they're going to be earning increased fringe benefit." And she said a lot of those young couples are taking advantage of this time off for the husband and wife to shop together for the dream home of their choice. She said, "Will you believe that just yesterday, with one young couple, I spent 2 hours showing them one house, that they examined every square inch of that house from the attic down to the basement and bought it?" She said, "Mr. Foreman, I've sold more houses in the last 6 weeks than I had sold in the previous 6 months." And she said, "I'll tell you something else." She said, "If this strike will just continue for 4 more weeks," she said, "I'll get rich. I won't have to work for a year." So help me God, that same conversation took place at the same head table, the same night, in the same community. Let me ask you something. What was the difference between these two people? What was it? It was their attitude, exactly. It wasn't what they were selling. It wasn't where they lived. It wasn't their. It was their individual, personal. And look at it this way: they're both in the same business in the same community. They both belong to the multiple listing service. You know what that means? They had identically the same houses to sell the same prospects. One's getting rich and the other's going broke, simply because of the way they saw the situation. Now that's what I'm saying to you, is that when you get excited about what you have to help other people enjoy a greater peace of mind and a greater excitement out of life, when you recognize that what you have is what they need and you're the person they need to get it from, then you're getting the right attitude and you're going to make things happen. And that's what this whole conference has impressed me with, is the good, wholesome, positive, excited attitude that you have. Sometimes people say something to me about this little bumblebee tie tack that I wear. This little bumblebee is the emblem of the company that I represent, Executive Development Systems of Dallas. You know, according to recognized aeronautical facts, because of the size and weight of his body, in proportion to his little bitty wingspan area, the bumblebee cannot fly. But the bumblebee doesn't know that. And so he goes ahead and flies anyhow. Now what we do is we teach people who think they're not supposed to be happy and healthy and successful, by developing the right, proper mental attitude and coupling that with specific identifiable purpose in their life, they can have, be, or do what they want to. We conduct a 3-day executive development training program in the hill country of Texas at a little place called Kerrville, Texas. Every other weekend we have people from throughout the United States, 17 foreign countries, 25 of the Fortune 500 companies who are represented in that class. They come in for 3 days and nights. We talk about how to have one good, happy, enjoyable, productive, successful day, one day at a time. And people say to me, "You mean you spend 3 days on how to have one good day?" That's right, because if you can learn the formula to have one good, happy, enjoyable, productive, successful day, and you do that 7 days in a row, what have you had? You've had a good, that's not too hard a question, is it? You've had a good week. Now, if you do that 52 times in a row, what have you had? You've had a good year. You notice the questions get harder as I go along, and I'm going to be testing. That's right, you've had a good year. Now, you do that over and over and over and over, you have a happy, enjoyable, successful life. But by actual survey, the majority of the people have one uptight, frustrating, by golly, get out there and deal with those dummies today type day. And they do it 7 days in a row, and they say, "Boy, it's been a rough week." Then they do that 52 times in a row, and they say, "Boy, life is dull and boring." We find that life is dull and boring primarily to dull, boring people. Life is exciting and enjoyable and successful to exciting, enjoyable, successful people. One of the greatest tragedies of life is the little boy, the little girl that says, someday when we get to be a big boy, get to be a big girl, then we're going to get married, we're going to move into that new home, and boy, we're going to be happy, and we're going to do this and this and this. And then when that happens, what do they say? Well, one of our children get here and get in school. We get this thing furnished like we want to and get that pool in the backyard. Get everything all fixed up. Boy, then we're going to be happy and we're going to have a good time. And then when that happens, what do they say? Well, whenever the children get out of school and get on their own, you know, and we get this place paid off. Boy, then we're going to be happy and we're going to do this and this and this and this. And then when that happens, what do they say? Well, when we retire, going to get that motor home. Going to travel across this great country and we're going to have an exciting time. Going to do all those things we've been wanting to do but never had time to do. And then one sad day on the way to the grave, they say, my gosh, I forgot to enjoy life. I forgot to live life while it was here. The most tragic and sad fact of life is going all the way through and failing to enjoy here and now today. So what I'm going to share with you right here and now today is the highlights of the 3-day Executive Development Successful Life Course program in which we share with people how to live one good, happy, enjoyable, productive, successful day, one day at a time. Whenever I talk about this, I'm reminded of a situation that happened in one of our classes back some time ago. We had an outstanding, dynamic gentleman by the name of Horace Ziegler, Judge Ziegler, from down Yazoo City, Mississippi. He's a brother to Zig Ziglar, the outstanding motivational trainer and speaker from Dallas. A very outstanding individual. I see several of you have heard him, and if you ever hear Zig, you'll never forget him. He's a dynamic individual. Anyhow, his brother was in the program. In fact, I'm happy to say Zig's one of our good graduates. I think that boy's done right good. But let me tell you about this. His brother was in this class, and he said, you know, Ed, whenever you talk about that good day business, he said, I'm reminded of a situation that happened to me when I was a little bitty boy. I said, bounce up here, Judge, and share it with us. He said, we'll give you a little bit of background. He said, whenever I was 2 years old, my daddy died, and my mama was left there at home on a farm with 12 kids to raise. And I'll never forget a situation. I was the youngest of those 12 children. I'll never forget a situation that happened whenever I was 5 years old. Every morning about 5 o'clock, my mama would come in there to the room where I was asleep. She'd come up there to that little bunk. She'd put her hand on my shoulder and she'd say, son, get up. We're going to have a good time today. I'd jump up out of that little bunk and I'd go running in there in the kitchen. And I'd sit down on a little 3-legged milk stool by the wood cook stove where Mama was fixing breakfast. She'd throw a quilt around my shoulders, pour me about a half cup of coffee, about half milk. I'd sit there and sip that coffee while Mama was fixing breakfast. And the other children would be out doing the chores, milking the cows, feeding the hogs, doing things that need to be done. They'd all come back in, we'd have breakfast together, and then they'd take on off to school. But because I was too young to go to school, I'd stay there and help Mama do the work that needed to be done on the farm. Now, this particular time I'm thinking about, we were picking turnip greens. I don't know if any of y'all ever picked turnip greens before or not, but that's along in the wintertime of the year when it's real cold, and we'd been down there and we'd picked several baskets of those turnip greens. We brought them back up there to the house, and out there behind the house we had this big old long wooden bench. Had 3 big old wash tubs filled with water where we'd wash those turnip greens. Well, I went out there that morning to wash those turnip greens, and there was a layer of ice about 1 inch thick frozen over the top of each one of those tubs. I got me an old axe handle, and I went along there and broke the ice on top of each tub. I'd get me a big old double handful of those turnip greens, and I'd dunk them down there in that first tub, and I'd wash them around, you know, and then dunk them over them off in that third tub. That old Mississippi soil's hard to get off them turnip greens. I'd pile them over on the porch. Mama'd tie them into bundles, and we'd put them into cardboard boxes, take them down to the general store, and swap them for sugar and flour and stuff we didn't raise there at home on the farm. Well, this particular morning, I was washing those turnip greens, and I looked down there at my hands, and it just seemed like a 5-year-old's hands were just so small, and my fingers were just so cold that they just turned numb. And I turned to my mother, and I said, Mama, I'm not having a good time today. And I just hurt all over. Just from the tip of my toes to the top of my head. I just black and blue and cold and hurting. And that night, whenever I went to bed, I was still miserable. Next morning, 5 o'clock, just like she always did, Mama come in there. She put her hand on my shoulder and she said, Son, get up. We're going to have a good time today. I just rolled over and I pulled that quilt on my head and I said, No, I ain't going to get up. It's going to be a bad day. Well, she just turned around, went on back in the kitchen, started fixing breakfast. The other children got up, did the chores, came in, had breakfast, went on to school. Mother went on out to work. About 10 o'clock, I heard her in there in the kitchen. I got up, came walking in. She looked at me. She said, "What are you doing in here?" I said, "Well, I got up to have some breakfast and help you do the work around here." She said, "Oh, no. No, son," she said, "don't you remember? You made the decision this morning that it was going to be a bad day." And she says, "Son, it's going to be a bad day all day long." She took me right back in there and put me right back in that bunk. Now, you'd think any mama would let her little boy up to have lunch. But bless that dear mother's disciplined heart of mine, I stayed right there in that bunk right through lunch. I didn't even get to get up whenever the other kids came home from school. I didn't even get to get up for supper. It was the longest, most miserable, bad day I'd ever spent in my young life. Next morning, 5 o'clock, just like she always did, Mama come in there, she put her hand on my shoulder, and she says, Son, get up. We're going to have a good time today. I bounced up out of that bed and I went running in there. I sat down on that little 3-legged milk stool. Mama threw that quilt around my shoulders, and I started sipping that coffee, and right then and there I learned a lesson I've never, ever forgotten. And that's this, that you and you alone make a decision every single day as to whether you're going to have a good day or a bad day. It's not that individual that may unthinkingly pull out in front of you on the way to work that decides whether you're going to have a good day or a bad day. It's not that irate, upset spouse or son or daughter or client that decides whether you're going to have a good day or a bad day unless you let them. The greatest power that you have is the power to choose every single day as to whether you're going to have a good day or a bad day. See, remember this, if you don't remember anything else I say, no one can make you angry unless you let them. No one can upset you unless you let them. But you and I both know people, don't we, that regularly go around letting uncontrollable circumstances determine whether they're going to have a good day or a bad day. You know people who get up and they go out and look outside and they say, "Oh, it's raining, it's going to be a bad day." And there's no way they have any control. They let the weather control their attitude. You and I both know people that can be taken off to work, have a little fender bender on the way to work, and look at my new car, all scratched up. They'll complain about it all day long, won't they? Some of them will gripe about it for a week, won't they? And then you know people who can roll their car over on the way to work. I mean, roll it over 3 times. Total it out. And get out in one piece and say, "Boy, ain't I lucky." The good Lord must have been riding with me. You see, it's not what happens to you that's so important as your reaction to what happens to you. It's your reaction to every little thing that happens in life. You plant the seed of a positive, happy, expectant thought. You get a positive, expectant action therefrom. It's impossible to think a thought and not have an immediate action therefrom. For instance, if you're thinking a happy, pleasant thought, what's the action immediately therefrom? You got a smile on your face, exactly. You're thinking uptight, frustrated, you got that scowl on your face. Now, you do that 30 days in a row. Whatever it is, any action you repeat 30 days in a row, what happens? You develop a habit, that's right. And the habits then begin to build the character that we become. That's the exciting lesson that I talk and I share with you as we go into this, is that the thoughts that we think become actions. The actions develop habits. And the habits then build the character that we become. And you may be saying in here, well, right now, come on, Ed. You're talking to the winners. You're talking to the leaders. We're the one that keep the old apple cart up and going around the track. You don't need to be. You're preaching to the choir. We're the positive characters of this organization. Let me run a little test on you here right now. Supposing you're taking off to the office. You got just enough time to get there. You got one of the biggest, most important potential clients that you ever had. You got an exact meeting time. You got just enough time to get there. And just before you get there, a train pulls across the road in front of you. Are you the type that says, "Oh, damn, that makes me mad"? If you are, you have learned to react negatively to those things over which you have no control. And yet, which a fit isn't going to help. For instance, is it going to make the train move any faster to throw a fit? Not going to help it at all, is it? Now, what does it do whenever you say, "Ooh, that makes me mad"? It increases your blood temperature, your blood pressure, and it starts the drip, drip, drip of the acid that starts the formation of ulcers. We have 4 medical doctors on our staff who say that any time you say, ooh, that makes me mad, up goes your blood pressure, up goes your blood temperature, and down goes your life expectancy. In fact, people who continually say, ooh, that makes my red, use more preparation H than anybody else. Because consciously, we are subconsciously programming ourselves for a defective part of our anatomy. And therefore, we begin to have difficulties. So what do you do under this kind of a circumstance? Here, what you do. You've got at least 3 possible alternatives. You say, hey, I know a shorter, faster way anyhow. Now, if you know a shorter, faster way, then you take that shorter, faster way. If you don't know a shorter, faster way, what you do is you say, that's all right, I'll use this time to plan my day specifically so I can get more done in less time. And so you take out a pad and a pencil, and you're not going to be interrupted by the telephone or anybody walking in on you right there in your own little private cubicle. So you work out your schedule. Now, if you're already so well organized, you have your day planned, you say, hey, this is a good time for me to just relax and let go and take a little mind-control relaxation. So you just reach down there, turn off the ignition, lean back in the seat of your car, and just relax from the tip of your toes to the top of your head and take a mind-control relaxation, letting go of all anxiety, frustration, and worry, and just replenishing yourself with energy. And people say, well, supposing you go to sleep. The person behind you will always be thoughtful enough to awaken you when the train moves and you can move on. Now, what we're talking about here is that it is impossible. It is impossible for you to think a thought that does not immediately become an action. Anytime we are finding out, anytime any thought of illness begins to come about, we begin to secrete the hormones into our body that begins to accelerate to bring about that. Anytime we think about health, anytime we think about good feeling, then we begin to program ourselves for that good feeling. Just to show you right now, for your own, I think you learn better from example than anything else. For you to appreciate more fully what I'm talking about, let me ask you all to just go through a little imaginary game with me, and it's a great thing you can share with some of your associates back home when you get back. Everybody just reach in your refrigerator right now and hold a lemon in your hand. Everybody get a lemon and hold it in your hand. Let's just make this as real as we possibly can. Imagine. All right, now look down there at that lemon in your hand. Come on, get a lemon in your hand there. I'm talking to everybody here. This ain't show and tell. All right, now squeeze that lemon. Feel the firmness of it? All right, now see that yellow waxy peeling? See the 2 little green pointy ends there? All right, now bring that lemon up to your nose and smell it. Smell that citrusy smell? All right, now put that lemon back down on the table. All right, now cut that lemon half in 2. Okay? Now pick up half of that lemon and look at it. See that center there? Now see the juice running down over the peeling? All right, now bring that half a lemon up to your nose and smell of it. Smell much sharper now, doesn't it? All right, now bite into it. Your mouth filled with saliva, didn't it? I noticed 8 or 10 of you there nearly got the lockjaw on that one, didn't you? See, now all that was a thought. But when you thought the thought of biting into that lemon, what happened? In came the saliva to wash away the lemon juice. Now that same thing happens whenever you think, hey, I know we're going to make this one. We then begin to secrete hormones into our bloodstream to give us that winner's expectancy performance. And when you do that, then you perform better and things begin to flow your way. That's the exciting thing that we're talking about, is that we become the character of the thought. Now, the exciting thing here is that if you don't like the character you are, you say, hey, I would like to be a little bit more positive. What you do is you begin to upgrade your thoughts, and that's precisely what I'm going to be sharing with you and showing you here today. If you think right now, you can think about people that you work with, and you can think of happy, enthusiastic, positive characters. I mean, they're just a kind of an individual. No matter what the weather is, they say, boy, it's a good day today. No matter what the job to be done is, they say, well, it may not be our responsibility, but by golly, we'll do it better than it's ever been done before. Now, if you'll think for just a moment, you can think of an individual that's 180 degrees away from that person. No matter what the weather is, they grind. But if the wind's blowing, they grind. If the wind ain't blowing, they say, it sure is hot and muggy around here when the wind ain't blowing in. No matter what the job to be done is, they say, why do we have to do it? That's the claims department. Why can't they do it, you know? You're thinking right now, he's talking about old George, aren't you? You're thinking of somebody you're easy to think of because there's more of those than there were the first time. Now, as you think about those 2 types of individuals, Which one would you rather work around on a regular basis? The uptight, frustrated one or the happy, enthusiastic one? Yeah, that's an easy question. The happy, enthusiastic one. Why would you rather work around the happy, positive, enthusiastic person? That's right. It's contagious. It's catching. You begin to feel that way too, don't you? Now let me ask you a more difficult question. Which type individual are you the majority of the time? Now let me ask you even a harder one, and you don't have to answer this one out loud. I can tell negative answers by the way you squirm in your chairs. How would you like to have to work for yourself? I asked that question day before yesterday, and the guy said, I'd quit before I'd do that. How would you like to be married to yourself? Now, that's bringing it right close to home, isn't it? Now, what I'm saying here is that life is too short to be a sorehead. Life is too short to be a griper and a complainer and always looking for the bad things. Supposing you only had 7 days left to live, you'd probably be a little happier and a little more loving and a little bit more enthusiastic than you've been being. Just start pretending that today is the most important day of my life, and I'm going to make it a good day. And when you make today a good day and you multiply it over and over and over, but a lot of people say, well, Ed, you know, that's a good philosophy and you can go around and teach it and preach it, but you don't understand. We're out there in the real business world. We're out there facing these people every day. We got all these, and now I'll never forget a situation that happened to me not too long ago. I was in a barber shop where I trade, and went in there and the barber said, there's no boy in here the other day that used to know you when you was in the oil business out in Midland, Odessa. And I said, oh, and he said, yeah. He said, Ed Foreman trades in here, doesn't he? And he said, yeah, as a matter of fact, he does. He said, I know Ed Foreman. And he said, I think Ed Foreman is a phony. And my barber looked at him kind of puzzled. He said, a phony? He said, why do you think Ed Foreman's a phony? He said, any guy that's involved in as many business activities as Ed Foreman is, that goes around with a smile on his face, acting like he's happy in these times of inflation and high interest rates, that every time you ask him how he feels, he responds with terrific, has either got to be stupid or he's a phony. Now, he said, I don't think Foreman's stupid. I just think he's flat phony. And my barber said, well, now, wait a minute. He said, let's take a look at this. He says, just supposing that Ed went around the way you're talking about. Supposing whenever he went in to talk to his banker, he said, 19% interest rate? Well, that's highway robbery. I don't know how I'm going to pay that loan back, much less 19% interest. My God, I never saw anything like it. How do you think it would feel if he talked to his clients and said, oh, boy, our business is bad. I mean, that's the roughest I've ever seen times before. He said, do you think that would help Ed Foreman's success? Do you think he would sell more and do more and build more? He said, well, I never thought about it that way. Now, that's what I'm talking about. So many people at this meeting have said to me, boy, I wish the agents back home felt like I do and felt like you talk. Now, the best way to get them to do that is to do what? Is to live the example. When you live the example, they say, by golly, he or she knows something, they're feeling good, by golly, I must not be thinking right, and I'm going to start acting that way too. And I know how some of you feel. You say, well, what about when you run into those real tough situations? Well, I got to tell you a funny thing happened to me the other day. I always try to get my income tax in early. And on April the 14th, my accountant came in, and we were going over the final, well, we still had better than 24 hours to get it done. And I didn't know what the rush was because I was going to be in town the next day anyhow, but he came in, and he had a very serious look on his face, and he said, boy, I got some bad news for you. And I said, well, you got any good news? He said, yeah, I got some good news. I said, well, for goodness sakes, give me the good news first. He said, well, Ed, he said, this past year has been a good year for you. He said, it's been the best year you ever had. He said, in ready-mix concrete and sand and gravel business, it's the most profitable year you've ever experienced. He said, in the building business, he said, it's the best year yet. He said, insofar as your speaking business is concerned, most profitable year. In the seminar business, he said, you finally broke across the point, and that was a profitable year. He said, we put you into the oil and gas drilling and development business for a tax shelter, but he said, we hit more good ones than we did bad ones, and he said, we've showed a positive cash flow in that, and we've got a profit on that. But he said, the bad news is you've got a whopping tax bill to pay. And I said, well, that's good. And he said, what do you mean that's good? And I said, I'd far rather be concerned with coming up with the money to pay a whopping tax bill and to try to cover an operating business deficit. But I said, if you think last year was good, you ain't seen nothing yet. I said, we already got leases signed for warehouses and buildings we haven't even built yet. Which means the ready-mix concrete business is going to be good if we don't do anything but supply ready-mix concrete and sand and gravel to our own operations. And insofar as the oil and gas business is concerned, we've got 6 prospects that are better than the best producer that we drilled last year. In speaking, we're now turning down 2 speaking invitations for every one that we take. In the seminar business, we have already better than 2/3 filled every seminar that we're going to hold for the next 12 months. He said, man, that is terrific. He said, I never saw anything like it. But he said, what about the recession? I said, we decided not to participate. That's the thing I'm talking to you about. Is that you make that decision. Y'all are a good group, and I like a group that gets excited and turned on. It makes, anytime you got a group that gets excited and turned on, it's just like a customer gets excited, you get excited, don't you? I share things we hadn't even intended to share with you. But I'm reminded, you know, the important thing here is that you really are the barometer. You are the one that sets the pace in your community. You are the lead person that decides whether that community is going to be alive and vibrant, whether business is going to be good or whether it's going to be bad. You know, when I talk about this, I'm reminded of a good story that my friend Paul Harvey shared back some time ago. You may have heard it. If you have, don't stop me. It's a good story in here, and we ought to all hear it again. He was telling about the young artist that had just received a commissioning to paint a portrait of a local builder. And he was so excited, feeling so good. It was the first major commissioning that he'd ever received. And so he went down to this little sidewalk cafe, all turned on. He bought a bottle of wine, and he was drinking that wine, celebrating the commissioning that he had received to paint this portrait. And while he was sitting there, drinking the wine, he looked over in his chair about 10 foot away, and there was a newspaper laying there with the headlines face up that said, "Hard times are coming." And the more he looked at it, the more he thought about it, the more uptight, the more frustrated, the more worried he became. And so the restaurant owner came by in a moment. He said, shall I get you another bottle of wine or maybe some crumpets? He said, no. He said, bring my check. I must go. He said, is something wrong? He said, hard times are coming, and it's no time for me to be frivolously spending my time sitting here drinking wine. He said, I got to go get to work. So he left, and the restaurant owner got to thinking about it. Hard times are coming. And the more he thought about it, the more uptight, the more frustrated he became. And so he went over and picked up the phone. He called his wife, and he said, sweetheart, he said, you know that new dress that you've ordered for the annual Chamber of Commerce banquet? He said, that's an awfully expensive undertaking for once or twice a year wearing. And he said, I understand hard times are coming. And he said, maybe if you could call them, maybe we could put that off a year, maybe cancel it altogether. She said, well, all right. So she went to the phone, she picked it up, she called this local dress shop. She said, I certainly hate to call you about this. I know you've measured me up for that beautiful new dress. You've ordered material, but my husband, the restaurant owner, says that hard times are coming, and we need to pull in our purse strings, need to be a little bit more frugal, and I'm going to have to put off at least a year and maybe cancel altogether the order on that beautiful new dress that you're making up for me. And they said, well, I certainly hate to hear it, but we understand. And so the dress shop owner got to thinking about it, and the more he thought about it, the more uptight, the more frustrated, the more anxious he became. And so he went over and picked up the phone, and he called his local builder. And he said, I certainly hate to call you about this, but he said, I understand that hard times are coming. And he said, you know those plans we've been going over to double the size of my dress shop? He said, this is a terrible time for me to be taking on that type of obligation. And he said, I'm going to have to cancel those plans for you to add on to my dress shop. Well, some of you are already way ahead of me. The builder got to thinking about it. He went over, picked up the phone, and called this young artist. And he said, I understand hard times are coming. And he said, this is no time for me to be frivolously spending my money to have a commissioning for a portrait to be painted. And he said, I'm going to have to cancel that commissioning that I gave you to paint my portrait. And so the young artist, in desperation and sorrow, went down to the little sidewalk cafe to drown his sorrows in a bottle of wine. And there he was, sitting there drinking the wine, and he looked over in his chair about 10 foot away. And there was this newspaper with the headlines face up that said, hard times are coming. He walked over, and he picked it up, and he examined it very closely. And the date line was 10 years old. They had laid the paper there from where they had been unpacking dishes in the restaurant. And yet the headline that it conveyed had infected the entire thinking of the leadership of that community, and they were preparing for and guaranteeing that hard times were on the way. That's what I say about you. You see, when you are dynamic and enthusiastic and alive and vibrant, that enthusiasm rubs off on every person you're around. Now, I'm just a business person, just as you are. I'm just sharing with you, but I'll tell you one thing. You're going to go out of here feeling better today than when you came in here. I know, I'm going to go out of here feeling better because we have shared. And what have we shared? We have shared some enthusiasm that I picked up by the implementation of the principles that I'm talking to you about right here. Let me ask you a very personal thing right here, right now. How many of you in this room today have a tendency to worry once in a while? Would you raise your hands? All right, most of you raised your hand. If you didn't raise your hand on that, and you probably didn't understand the question. Now, if there were a simple, easy-to-follow little method that would help you recognize what worry is and help you overcome this troublesome pestilence for the rest of your life, you'd probably want to know how to do it, wouldn't you? Say yes. Yes. All right. Let me tell you what worry is. Worry is nothing more or less than negative goal setting. I'll put it another way. Worry is nothing more or less than vividly thinking about what you don't want to happen. It's the misuse of your imagination. You see, worry is thinking, oh, I bet we can't pay off that note at the bank. Or if you're a banker, thinking, oh, I bet they can't pay off that loan. I made them. Worry is thinking, oh, I bet little Johnny or Mary flunk out of school. And what happens? It begins to knot up your gut, doesn't it? It begins to increase your blood pressure and your blood temperature, and it starts the shortening of your life. And many times people say, well, if there's anything that old boy knows, he knows what worry is. All right, now having defined what worry is, projecting a negative outcome, or thinking negatively about things that already passed and over which you have no control. Let me ask you to play a little game with me right now. Everybody just close your eyes and think about, everybody just close your eyes right now, and think about your most outstanding number one desire, your number one goal in life. Maybe it's to be in that beautiful new home in the country with that wooded acreage all around there. Maybe it's to have that cabin in the mountains or that cottage on the lake. Maybe it's to see little Johnny or Mary graduate from school and get into business on their own. Maybe it's to see you get your business operation in such shape that you can continue to grow and to make that thing prosper and to be among the winners with which you're associated here today, even more effectively than you're doing now. Whatever your number one goal, your number one desire specifically may be, right now think about it with your eyes closed and vividly imagine, actually see in your imagination yourself enjoying the fulfillment of the realization of the accomplishment of that goal. Smell the smells. Hear the sounds. Feel the feelings. Isn't that a wonderful feeling that you feel right now? There's a tingling goes up your spine as you just see yourself enjoying the fulfillment of the realization of that goal. You can all open your eyes right now. You know, if you could be up here in front and you'd look around this group, you know what you'd see? That's right. You'd see a lot of great big smiles. In fact, usually folks laugh right out loud during that exercise. Now, you know what that feeling is called that you had just now when you were thinking about what you wanted to happen? You know what that's called? That's called happiness. You see, when you think about what you want to happen, you feel happy right now, don't you? Now, let me ask you something. John, do you do your job better when you're happy? Of course you do. Do you feel healthier, Tom, when you're happy? Why, of course you do. Don, do you get along better with your wife, your family members, and associates whenever you're happy? Why, of course you do. See, all of those are easy questions to answer in the affirmative. Yes, whenever you feel good, whenever you're happy, everything flows better today, and therefore today is a good day.